Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being patient with us on starting a little later. We had to take care of some business in a timely fashion based on some advertisements. So, welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our work session. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Frank for some introductions.
Yeah, welcome everybody. It's great to have everybody here this evening. The August work session was very productive in terms of the discourse, the questions that happened as we went, and that's really kind of what we're hoping for tonight. We kind of expected as the days were leading up to this, we might have a little bit of a smaller crowd. There's just a lot going on in September. Fall sports season is really the busy sports season from a school standpoint. So we understand that, but we are video taping the meeting again, and we'll have that out up on the website tomorrow. So as you're talking with your friends and your family and they weren't able to be here tonight, please share that out. They'll be able to see the meeting. The meeting is going to be a presentation with our partners from Performance Service. One thing that I'll just give you a heads up on, we're going to use an old teacher trick. We're not going to give you the handouts until the end of the class. And a lot of times kids get started on their worksheets and they're not really listening to the teacher. So we're going to hold off on giving you the handouts tonight. You'll get those at the end. Really want everybody engaged with the presentation, thinking about what it is that you're seeing. Develop your questions. There'll be a time for public comment and questions here at the end. The first part of tonight's presentation will provide a proposal for addressing our most immediate needs through our bonding capacity available to us and keeping the debt service tax rate neutral. For those that may not know, we do have the capacity to do projects within the budget of about 23 to 25 million, depending on the timing of when those would be issued and where the interest rate would fall. The immediate needs proposal is presented as a step. If supported by the school board and the community, we would begin as early as possible, potentially next year in 2025. The immediate needs proposal addresses two areas that have been identified going back to our facility study committee from last winter. First, you will hear about a proposal to address the capacity issues we are experiencing in the elementary grades. In addition, the immediate needs proposal addresses improving the entries in buildings where we need to look at modernizing entrances to make them safer with design aspects that provide those sorts of solutions. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Marianne McMahon with Performance Services, and she's going to get us started tonight with our presentation.
I have it wireless if you want. Wireless is probably better. Okay. I'm still a teacher. And so I think our first slide kind of gives a little bit of information about the bond component, and I'm not sure, Scott, did you want to talk about this particular slide, or was Eric going to?
Yeah, I can. That's fine. So I kind of wanted to circle back before we talk about why we're just doing what we're doing with this bond, because I'll admit there was even confusion amongst us on the board as we approached this. So one school of thought could be, well, why don't you use your bond and combine that with some referendum monies and do a bigger project? That's not legal. That's what this slide addresses. Our bond counsel, Ice Miller, put this together. And if you weren't at the meeting where that was talked about, that's going to be something on your mind, I feel like. So I wanted this to be in front of everybody to start with. This is the reason we're looking at what we can do with bonds. Once we've exhausted that money, we'll talk about potentially doing a referendum or something along that lines. But if you have any question, he is actually available online too, if it doesn't make sense to you or whatever. But this is upon advice of council. This isn't something we came up with on our own.
Thanks for clarifying that, because it really sets the stage for talking about this first short-term bond option. So Ryan, if you don't mind, right now I'm going to pause. If you cannot see a screen, please feel free to readjust so that you can see the screen. This is about the size of what the font is going to be for tonight, so I just want to make sure you can follow along and understand what's being proposed. This very first one, as Kevin had alluded to, is really based upon what the community has talked about in terms of the big needs for the district and the immediate needs being doing something to help with the capacity issues at the elementary level. In addition to that, there's also some safety and security issues as well. And so this first look at what might happen with the bond funds would be for us to look at the primary building, the one that we happen to be in this evening, and look at expanding it to actually become a PK2 school. That would, at the same time, look at Veal Elementary as a building that it would need to be determined what would be the future of Veal, but the students that attend Veal would now join the grade level centers with all of their peers. And so that would be what would happen for Veal and here at the primary. So you would have about 600 students. And in that project, it would also address the safety and security components as well. So then you kind of pause and think a little bit about that intermediate school. It was 2, 3, and 4. I would say when Jerry Rolfson, the architect, and I visited last year and got to tour, we started to see firsthand what some of the challenges were. They had already lost the Mind in Motion program. They had already moved STEM down to be part of the library in the Kiva area. So there were already many adjustments happening. And this year, talking with Principal Cherry, they also had to divide the art room into 2 separate places and move an art room into a regular classroom. So he's just trying to do magic every day, trying to make all the programs that they want to see happen for teaching and learning happen in that building. And it's just been a challenge. He's up for it and he's doing a great job, but there are definitely some positives to being able to spread out the numbers of sections and to be able to spread out the intermediate. And I see Principal Cherry, you're here tonight. Did you have anything you want to add? We've had some great conversations about your building.
No, I thought you asked how we would have empty rooms, how we would use it, we would incorporate back in. I've got that if we need it. Other than that, that's what I had.
Thank you. And so, one thing that I do recall us talking about was if we could keep the primary, the second grade back at the primary building, when you have your youngest learners, for them to have the opportunity to stay in the same building for that 3rd year, developmentally gives them more time to learn how to do school in the same environment. So that was another positive that we chatted about along the way. So after that, what happens at the 5, 6, and at the 7 through 12 is really addressing the safety and security with the secure entrances. And so we really felt like these were your primary concerns, trying to help the elementaries not feel so crowded. So that could be addressed by these addition, and that the safety and security components could also be addressed through the bond funding. So on a map, it would look like for students. Because Veal is so far below geographically, we just put an arrow to point down where Veal is, that the kids really would just have 2 groups that would have a change. The 2nd grade would stay at the primary, and then the students from Veal would matriculate into the grade level centers. So I will pause there and see what discussion there is or comments from the board in regards to a short-term bond option.
So I'd start with, does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make from the public? If not, I feel like we've spent a lot of time coming to this. This might not have been the solution that we hoped for. This is the solution we feel like we can afford and has the greatest impact on our elementary schools, the overcrowding issues that we have at the intermediate, creating space for programming, and having the biggest impact that we can have with the funds that we have available. And to be clear with this bond will not affect the tax rate. This is a tax neutral bond. So, and also with the security improvements, we will get a safe and secure entry at every building. I'll go ahead and bring it up now. We're definitely looking at a secure entry to the junior high. And we'll talk about, if a referendum were to happen, if there's a need for a second secure entry to that building, or if some grade realignment makes that unnecessary. But we're going to have the funds in this bond to make a second secure entry to the high school if necessary. And I think with the timing and the discussion that will happen around a referendum potential, we will know whether we need that or we could use those funds for something else in a timely fashion. Yes, sir.
Scott, you may not know this yet, but as far as details on, in addition to this building, do you know what that would look like? Or would that just be classrooms? Would that also be, expanding the cafeteria, music, art, stuff like that? And maybe you don't know those yet. It's just, but that's just what I would thought off the top of my head.
I'll let Jerry handle that. That's his department.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Jerry Rolfson, I'm the Director of Architecture for Performance Services. We don't know exactly what it would look like, but we have done enough concept kind of review what it could be so that we could understand what the magnitude of the scope could be of the building, to know that it would be classrooms. We need additional classrooms, not just for the additional grade level, but just because this building is close to, if not at capacity as it is, holding the classroom sizes the way the district would like to see them. So that would be the biggest part of it, but also potentially moving the front door to a different location, creating a secure entrance, kind of getting a new development, possibly from my directions right here, the east side of the building is a possibility. A vast majority of it would be classroom space though, and we'd be looking at a fair amount of renovation interior as well, so that we could try to align, for instance, wings with common grade levels. The building is kind of spread out a little bit now, not all the kindergartners are together. And so we try to make that happen as a part of the project too, just so we can get your teams of teachers together in the way that you would want to have them in terms of collaboration.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, I would kind of throw in that as we've looked at this, obviously you don't want to put a new wing on a building that's not being taken care of and kept up. So part of that budget will be to do a lot of renovations here to get this building secured for the future. Probably, I think one of the talks was this stage behind me going away and becoming space for the cafeteria, because you're obviously going to need some more room for that. But a lot of that stuff is going to come from more talks with Kristen and the team here, and with Devin and everyone, to make sure we use the monies the best we can to make this building something we can call our anchor to start with, of the improvements, the vision that we have to move forward.
Are there any other comments before we move into the referendum part of the discussion?
If not, I want to kind of preference the referendum topics as we move forward here. Everybody wants us to have a long-term plan. That's heard a lot, and that's something that this board wants to have, but I think we need to rephrase that. We're going to have a long-term vision for what we hope can be accomplished through projects and wise use of tax money, but we're not all going to be here for the next 20, 40 years. So we're going to try and get together a vision for future boards to keep moving forward, and you're going to see some different ideas. We're giving you several options because we want this to be a true community supported idea of how we move forward, not just letting people decide in the future of Washington Community Schools.
Thank you. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump in. We have 5 options that we'd like to share with you this evening. They all build upon the first phase being the bond work. Okay, so one of the guiding principles when we were working on this particular part of the referendum options is that it had to feed off of what was already in place, which is part of the long-term vision. So what we've done is there's going to be 5 slides and 5 maps. And across the top is the bond information that you just saw. So on each slide like this, you'll see that. And immediate below it is an option that could be a possibility for some drivers in a referendum project. This very first one is one that you'll see, there's a column on the right that says new school. In this particular option, there is no projection for a new school to be built. Instead, and I'm going to start on the right and go back to the left, a little counterintuitive, but I'm going to start more at the high school end on this one. This is where you could have an opportunity to add on to your high school and actually bring your 6th grade over so that you would have a 6 through 8 junior high in combination with the high school in a way that they are 2 separate buildings under one roof. It's kind of called a school within a school concept. They may share the cafeteria, that sort of thing. So that's the idea. So it's an attached but separate middle school. Next to that, you see that the suggestion is that the upper school becomes actually a central office, perhaps a professional development center. It could be a place at some point in time where you have daycare for staff. It could be preschool. There are all kinds of things that could happen to that building. The intermediate is the other place, and you'll notice there's, if you can see it in green, that's kind of where there's additions or some sort of larger project that's occurring. At this time, you could add the required rooms for your intermediate to be a 3-5 building, and everything else would remain the same. So in this particular option, I'm just going to bring up one of the conversations that I've heard during my time here. This one actually would accomplish the idea that you would have at least 3 grade levels at every building. And we talked about why that might be important. You want to have that if you can, because you're not losing half of your kids every year. So when you have a 7-8 building, your 8th graders leave, you get in the new 6th graders, you've lost 50% of your kids. So for relationship building, it's ideal if you can have 3. It doesn't always work, but I just wanted to point that out, that in this particular option, that was a possibility. So the next page is the map. So your primary is going to start where it is, PK2. Kids would go out to the intermediate, which is now is 3 through 5. They would then go to the junior, senior high school campus for 6 through 12. So that's kind of the way it would feel for the kids to matriculate through the school system. Do you want me to just keep going through each of them? Or okay. All right, let's go on to the next one. Option number 2. In this particular one, you're going to see that there is a new school suggested. So again, I'm going to start at the right and the second row on the bottom. And in this particular school, we would look at having a 3 through 6 grade school. And I also want to point out, you have roughly on average about 200 kids per grade level. So I just multiply a grade level by the number. So in this case, it would be a school that would actually be for about 800 students. Junior, senior high then could spread out and become a high school in of itself. The upper could become that central office, professional development, PK, staff daycare, all the things you want to dream about. It would probably require some renovations based upon the programs you decide to put there. And the intermediate, because there's been conversation about how the intermediate already has some of the amenities that would support a middle school, that it might be a good location for a middle school. So you already have your tennis courts and your track, et cetera. And then the primary and B will remain the same. So in this particular map, now the kiddos would again start at the primary, PK through 2. Then they're going to go to the new school on the undeveloped property for 3 through 6. Then they would go to the intermediate and then to the high school. Option number 3. This would be a smaller new school. So this time we're looking at new construction as being a 2 grade level building. In this case, grades 3 and 4. The high school would become a 9-12. And this time we're throwing in another idea. Maybe the central office moves into some of the space at the high school, and you have the ability to determine what to do with that current facility. Maybe it's something you would sell, maybe it's something you repurpose, but again, it puts another facility into play that would have a different option. The upper remains 5-6, and we put in, because we know that this might be a need, if you wanted to get rid of the portables at some point, maybe you could reimagine the auditorium into classrooms and remove the portables, just a thought. And the intermediate is that 7-8 for 400 students. So the map for option 3. Again, PK2. Then you travel out to the new building for 3-4. Back up to upper, staying the same, over to the intermediate and the high school. I will say there are a lot of transitions in that particular option. Option number 4. This one has a new school again, this time grades 6 through 8. So now we're looking at a 3 grade level new building. So we've got a 4 grade level, 2 grade level. This one is 3 in the new construction. Junior high gets to spread out and just become the high school. Upper, you would make a decision on what would happen there. The intermediate would become 3 through 5. This again would require some renovations in addition to accommodate. And I want to point out that this particular option does again have 3 grade levels in each of the buildings, if that's a priority for you. So the map, you would start, again, the primary PK2 is all in place because of the bond funding. Intermediate, 3-5 with an addition. And you go to 6 through 8 at a new property site, and then 9 through 12 spread out at the high school. A 5th option this one has been talked about quite a bit, I believe. 7-8 would be the new school. So now we would have a new 7-8 middle school on the property. The junior senior high would become 9 through 12. Again, you could consider putting central office there, maybe in some of the space, closing that central office building or repurposing it. And then everything else really remains the same. Your upper stays 5-6, your intermediate 3-4, and the PK2. There's also opportunities in many of these options. At any time, if you decided to move your preschool out of this building, you might be able to move it to the upper or to a different location if that space was needed. So the final map. It's pretty easy. Start out PK2. Intermediate stays the 3-4, upper stays 5-6, but now we would go to a 7-8 junior high setting before going to the high school 9 through 12. So those are just 5 options of thought of how your referendum might be something that you pursue if you decide to at some point in time. We just want to make sure that it builds upon everything that would happen perhaps in a bond project. So that was our charge, and hopefully we've delivered on that and some ideas for you to ponder and think about.
Thanks, Mary Ann. There has been a lot of time and discussion put into presenting these options to you, but to be clear, if you like part of option 2 and part of option 4, and we can combine those, there's nothing that said everything in option 2 has to happen away or whatever. These are just ideas of what we can do with our facilities to try and help out with the space issues at our high school, because we've chose with this bond to work on our elementaries, but we're not addressing any issues with the high school. There are several options to deal with the new property. there is an option that wouldn't come out of the new property at all. So we would love to hear your feedback and thoughts from what you've seen here up to this point. I'm sure everybody's thinking dollars too, and that's important. But when we want to talk about the vision, what is the vision? Do we like the idea of creating a quote elementary campus out here with all of our elementary kids going all the way to sixth grade within, you know, a few hundred feet of this building? Or do we want to get the junior high out this way? Do we want to keep it all up around the high school? And what are your thoughts?
Scott, just from my point of view and the things that I've done in my career, I like the idea of 6, 7, 8 middle school. I like the idea of the middle school being separated from the high school. But I think they need to be, for facility-wise, football field, track, things like that, they need to be close to the high school. Not part of, but close to. Most of the schools that we deal with are 6, 7, 8 middle schools. So to have a 5, 6 school someplace, those kids are still going to have to come into the junior high / middle school to participate in athletics. So it would just make more sense to have them together. So it depends on whether you want to, the best option would be in the neighborhood of the high school where you have a separate building for the junior high kids in that area, my opinion. But the next best choice would be a 6, 7, 8 out here on the new property, my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that is something we heard a lot through the community committee, and that's the reason we've got some options for that there in the different options we present. Anybody else?
One of my main concerns is how many times the kids are going to move. So something like option 3, I would have a really hard time supporting, because pretty much every 2 years they're having to relearn a new school and new teachers.
Steve? I don't mean to take up all the, having dealt with kids coming into the junior high school for the better part of 40 years, the biggest problem the kids had coming into the junior high school was not to change the building. It was the fact that they were afraid they were going to have their friends. They had to relearn new people in their new classes. They could care less about what floor the class was on. That they were all in that same bucket. So that wasn't the problem. It was, where are my friends going to be? With the grade level buildings, the kids already have that problem solved. They've got their friends with them. All they're doing is moving to a new location, and they'll work it out themselves. Less of a problem than I think parents think it is. The big problem is, I'm scared to lose my friends. And we've taken care of that.
Yeah, I appreciate both those comments. And I think if this board had unlimited funds, there's no doubt that we would not want to see the multiple buildings and moving every 2 years. But we're also trying to give options that we hope we can afford as well. But I do appreciate your comment, because moving to grade level centers, that was one of the ideas, was to get all the kids together. It is new staff though, new faces in the building, the unknown. Got a comment in the back?
Yeah, my concern with having the elementary campuses both on this side would be the traffic flow. It's already a pretty big nightmare out here right now, we can all agree. But they're the children who are more often picked up and dropped off by parents. When you get to junior high and high school, you're too cool for parents anymore. So if you have 2 elementary buildings, so you're gonna have every elementary student in this community, you're gonna have terrible traffic flow no matter what you do from either side, because you're gonna have a lot of people and a lot of buses, and I think that would create a huge problem for the community.
Thank you for that, and I think we hear that argument both ways of those moms and dads that have kids in 2 different elementary schools on the opposite sides of town and trying to get to there too. So I don't know that there is a perfect solution for that. We do, without getting too deep in the weeds, we do own property on 257, so we would have the ability to direct some of that traffic away, or that were a solution that we want to move forward with.
My personal opinion, I like the idea of moving 7th and 8th grade out of the high school to open up the space for 9 through 12. I like the idea of taking 7, 8 to current intermediate building with that age group. Parents struggle to get their kids to and from practices. The high school being so far from the sports complex, a lot of times you have the juniors and seniors that are able to provide transportation for the freshman and sophomore, where the 7th and 8th grade, they have tennis, track, the baseball, softball, cross country, soccer. They can have their practices right after school. Then they're not waiting so long, I feel like, to have their practices where they have to wait for parents to pick them up or the bus to drop them off and then bring them back to the sports complex. So personal opinion, I think that's a great idea.
Steve? I gotta get my 2 cents worth in. I was part of the short-term bond option planning, apparently. I would have liked to have seen us have more options for our short-term bond, and one of them being what Mr. Myers was talking about, and possibly moving the 7th and 8th grade to the intermediate building and creating a 4 grade level primary building here, and possibly utilizing Veal as a pre-K building to kind of alleviate the problem here for this building. But I think if we move forward with the short-term bond option, we're very limited in what we're doing. We're not going to affect the entire school population. And moving forward, I would like to see us add to our short-term bond option a second one, and that being moving the junior high to the intermediate building, and possibly utilizing Veal as a pre-K and building a 4 grade level building on this site. I agree with Mr. Myers as far as the intermediate building would be a perfect place for a junior high with the gymnasium, the track, a soccer field in the middle of that, tennis courts there. So that's what I would like to see us do. If we're just going with this one short-term bond option, I don't think we're going to address very many of our problems. And by moving the junior high out of the high school, it gives us room to expand our curriculum there. It makes our cafeteria usable there. It gives us the opportunity to create a new entrance through the junior high area. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that can be addressed as we move forward with what the plan would be with the short-term bond. I guess committee that brought that forward took the feedback that we got at the last work session about overcrowding on this campus if you tried to add more than one grade to it. The cost involved with repurposing a building. But yeah, I mean, like I tried to say earlier, all these options are just that, options. We can mix and match however we want. For a presentation, we tried to frame it around what we thought would be the idea with the short-term bond, but there's been no vote taken, no plans drawn up.
I appreciate the committee coming up with the short-term bond option. But at the same time, before that committee makes that our only option, I think it has to be addressed by the entire board. I mean, we're not gonna move forward with a 3-member committee limiting our options. I think that's a board decision and not just a committee decision.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, we're just trying to get something we can move forward with decision wise, and get feedback on what the best way to do that is.
I think it's some follow-ups to that. I mean, I definitely agree. I think getting 7, 8 out of the high school space makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Frees up that 9 through 12 building, gets the grade levels out of there, creates a lot of space naturally with that. I don't know if initially I was a huge fan out at intermediate, but after kind of talking with a lot of people, I think it does make a lot of sense based on where that is located at. But I think too, the budget obviously restricts where that can happen and how much that can happen within the short-term bond money. I guess my question is, with that, is it affordable to be able to add another grade level outside of just, going to another grade level at primary? But the big thing is on that suggestion, pre-K to K out of Beal, that's not a sustainable number out there. I put that number at basically 248 if you use the number for kindergartners at 200, and then we have 48 preschoolers. That's that number at 248. And if I recall correctly, the capacity is about 125 based on the numbers provided earlier. So that is not necessarily a feasible solution based on those numbers without significantly upgrading that Beal building, of which it is not in the condition to be able to uphold based on the numbers we received on the committee prior. So I think that would have to get much more creative because the Beal is just not sustainable for that high number of kids. So that would just be my counter to that solution. But I definitely agree. I think 7, 8 out of that building, and I kind of echo Quentin's in that would be a priority for me kind of in the future. But I do like the short-term bond option. I think it's being economical with the choices at hand and trying to relieve space. But that was just kind of my thoughts on that with kind of the rebuttal there, if that makes sense.
As I sit here and think and have heard comments, we talk about safety and new entrances, and I don't dispute any of that, but I would expand upon that idea in terms of our long-range vision, and all it takes is money, of course. But I would hope that the long-range vision would be to eventually create a single educational campus for Washington Community Schools, maybe made up of several buildings. That would probably be a good thing, but that eventually that's where we want to end up, and that way we control entrance to the property and as well as the buildings. I would also wonder aloud here, regardless of if we do a referendum, whatever building we might build, I would assume, which is always dangerous, that building would be built in such a way as that it could be added on to or expanded to meet future needs. As opposed, maybe we don't build a series of buildings, maybe we build one, and then we can, with the thought or plan, generally speaking, of going ahead and adding to it later. I'll be quiet now.
Is there a plan or desire to grow the preschool program? And if so, have those numbers been included in any of these plans?
I'll just say with the bond issuance, short-term bond, based on the budget, yes, there would be desire to add a couple more classrooms for pre-K, but we also have to look at all our needs for special education, all the other things that go into running a K through 2. That has to be our focus. If we could expand the preschool, that would be great too. But it won't be the priority, I guess. That would be something that could be considered for the building. That comes with its own set of challenges as far as improvements that will have to be made to that building at some point if we're going to continue to use it. Your cost of doing business with another building. So there are a lot of considerations to whether or not that could happen. Okay, I think at this point, we're probably ready to talk a little bit of numbers. I want everybody to keep in mind as these are brought out, these are very high level. We've said that word a lot, but without a design and site plan and those kind of things, we're going to use a set of numbers that, to me, the focus is more of what percentage of a project is the cost. In other words, if the most expensive project is X dollars, then how much savings would we have if we cut back and we only built two grades instead of 4, or two grades in a junior high instead of 3, and what we feel like it could be supported by the public. But let's not get hung up on, man, I think their numbers are 10, 20, 30% high, whatever they are. Let's look at which project addresses the need and is palatable to the community if it could be brought in at a reasonable number. We don't have numbers for a different option with the bond in here. I'll just say that up front. But I think possibly Jerry could talk about, we did have numbers at our last meeting for adding 2 grades to this building. We had some numbers through some different discussions we've had about what it would take to repurpose the intermediate. So we might be able to throw a little bit of numbers in on that as well. I think you go ahead and present it as is, Jerry, and then we could circle around to some of those other ideas as they've been presented and try and attach some numbers to those. And we are just going to give numbers for, in option 1, it was the separate but attached junior high. We'll give a number for that. We'll give numbers for the new building ideas out here. The thing that's really difficult is to try and give you a number of what it's going to cost to make intermediate to junior high. Depends how much work you want to do to it. Do you want to completely refurbish that building, put new walls in, all new HVAC, everything, or do you just want to get it usable as a junior high based on the available funds? So we left those out. Jerry will show you those are TBD, to be determined, based on what we feel like can be done.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening again. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll start to review some of the preliminary budget estimates. Again, we're trying to cast a broad net across these estimates because you want to make sure you can capture a wide range of opportunity for the work, and there's always an opportunity then to refine and pare back, if you will, down the road. We've spent most of our energy focusing on the development of some budget estimates for the short-term bond. We can certainly expand, as we've been doing, our review of budgets across different options, as some of those have been talked about tonight. We're happy to do that to support the end result of the discussions tonight down the road. But I do want to talk about these first. The focus for the short-term bond would be, of course, this building. And there was a question earlier about, what's the focus of construction here? It would be mostly classrooms. In fact, enough classrooms where we would build some flexibility. And so not just purely the numbers of rooms needed to satisfy the target number in a classroom for each grade, but you're going to have times where you might have a higher enrollment year and you've got that kind of riding across the school district. You might need an extra room. So rather than taking away a space for other programs, having a couple of flexibility rooms built in there for that use, so that's included in these. The cost budget estimate for the pre-K through 2 building, we're estimating about $24 million for that. Then the other buildings then that are in play would be the intermediate school at grades 3, 4, the upper elementary school staying at 5, 6, and the junior high school and high school building staying 7 through 12. There you'd be limited in terms of scope of improvements, focused mostly on safety and security elements to address those concerns there where we're able to. So I'll pause there just for any questions related to the budget or the community. Yes.
Approximately how much square footage or classroom space that addition add to this?
To jog that out of my memory base. I have that information. Give me, I can pull that up before we leave, but I don't have that right off the top of my head. Okay, so we'll come back to that question. Thank you. Okay, so if there's not any other questions related to that one, we'll move on to estimates. We do have, as Mr. Arthur mentioned, for referendum options, focused on either the new building or what I would call for option 1, the equivalent of a new building, which would be at the high school, where we would be, at least in option number 1, we would be proposing that the 6th grade be moved there, so it'd be a 6 through 12 building. So we're really talking about the equivalent of a new building, a substantial amount of square footage of being added. Now this one is, in order to add a substantial amount of square footage at the high school, there are some pretty big impacts there because you're talking about having to expand across what are currently road right-of-ways and areas where public utilities are probably running in front of the building in order to capture the square footage that would be necessary to support this. So it's a big ask. There'd be a lot of pre-planning needed if that was the decision was made to go this route. Just to make sure that, number one, that the conversations haven't even been approached with the city. I think we mentioned that in a previous meeting that we had. So even the feasibility of this has to be explored with the community first, with the city first, to make sure that this would be a viable option. But the nice thing about this particular solution is it, creates a core center of town and would certainly reinforce the center of the community. The budget estimate for the work on that campus then to support the additions and renovations for that would be in the $52 million range, with the vast majority of that cost being in site work preparation and the building additions that would be needed to support it. It's for referendum option number 2. This is the option where you would be building a new grades 3 through 6 facility on the property that is available adjacent here. That would be for 800 students. And then, of course, this building would stay, the K2 intermediate school would become a middle school, 7A, upper elementary school would be repurposed for central office, perhaps in professional development, and the junior and senior high school would become the grades 9 through 12 in this scenario. So for the new facility budget estimate for this, we're projecting that the budget would be about $59 million. And you can see the breakdown there between the building and the site. The answer to the previous question related to the amount of square footage addition, and I think that might be short 2 classrooms actually, on there, but 28,000 square feet, it's actually probably 30,500 or 31,000 square feet is probably the actual, we added a couple of rooms to that. I'll move on to referendum option number 3. And again, focus on the scale of magnitude differences between these. And you can kind of get a sense, of course, the larger the building, the more the cost. So you're kind of seeing this kind of stair step up and down depending on how much building and how many grades are being accommodated. So in option number 3, that new school option is for a grade 3-4 building. And of course, the cost then correlates with that with the smaller schools. So about a $43 million building project there. The other grade levels then are K through 2, pre-K through 2, 7, 8 at the intermediate school, upper elementary school remaining 5, 6 in high school, 9 through 12.
Jared, one thing I want to point out at that point, if you drill back to that, and something that I think has to be considered is we looked at these options. You know, obviously, that's a lower cost that we would have to put forth for a referendum, but we're only getting half the grade, new building, half the movement there. The upper is going to stay in use as a 5-6, so we're going to have to spend monies there to maintain and upgrade that building. You know, in the previous option, it talked about moving central office and some other things to that building, but we don't have to. If we don't build a building that includes the 5-6, then we do have to keep a building, a separate building. We have to maintain it for the 5-6. That's just something that I feel like needs to be part of the conversation. I don't know. We were talking about this earlier. It was about a $15 million difference between a 3-4 versus a 3-6. If you have to spend 5 on the upper to keep it in good shape for the next 20, 40 years, then it's really only a $10 million. So just different ideas that as you digest these numbers, those TBD numbers are a big deal, and it's not something that we can attach to a firm number to.
Okay, thank you. Then option number 4, this one would be a new grade 6 through 8 middle school. And this one, because of the middle school programming and number of grade levels, I believe this is the most highest budgeted of the group of options here, just because the programming that's needed to support middle school and exploratory subjects means you have more rooms in the building. And so not just bigger kids, but more space related to programming. And so that budget estimate would be $71 million approximately for that that project. I will note also that intermediate school becomes 3-5. In order to make it a 3-5 building and not have the overcrowding issues of 3-grade building at that site, it would require an addition. So there'd be costs there for sure, just to satisfy that addition, beyond any other needs that would be required. So you might keep that in mind as you look at some of these, which options have another facility that requires an addition, because there's certainly the cost there as a minimum just to support that addition. Okay, and then as we look at the last option, then this is showing the new facility then as a 7-8 rather than a 6-3 middle school facility. And of course, the cost then correlates going down with that. So the budget estimate for that would be 51 million approximately. And then the other configurations for the schools in the district would be pre-K through 2, intermediate school 3 through 4, upper 5, 6, and high school at 9, 12.
Gary, something that was a hot button topic in the last referendum, when you look at those junior high, middle school options out on the new property, are you including costs for any sports facility?
No, these do not factor in new fields or sports fields, just the necessary support for parking and bus auto drop off for that facility. I'll open it up for questions or comments related to budget estimates.
I just want to go back to the short-term plan. I believe that everything listed that we saw is based on the results from the school study committee. I just wanted to point out that putting any money at all into fuel does not follow the long-term vision of eventually consolidating into 2 or 3 campuses.
Gary, since the topic was brought up, do you have access to what the cost was to make this even like a K through 3 building you had in the last meeting?
Perhaps.
Okay, yeah, that was option 6. So you're at 24 million on here now. We had the K through 2 with the one wing for the 2nd grade at 22 at that time. Different numbers on that. The option to go pre-K through 3 on this site was at 33,500,000. And that didn't include any monies for any changes or renovations to any other building, as far as what you would do with the intermediate or anything like that.
I will mention too, the numbers for the referendum options, those are inflated to assuming that it would be a project that would be bid in the year of 2027 and probably would be a 18 to 24 month construction project. Probably 24 months is what we would expect, just to give you kind of an idea where that would be. So we have to kind of look ahead and try to predict what's going to happen, with the roller coaster of construction inflation that we live in.
Also, something you shared with me, and it's tough because we've had a lot of conversations, and I remember things you've told me, but I don't know if there are things that have been said publicly. This, you're using a design build formula process, so you had a comment on how much soft costs are built into the number you're looking at versus a different version of the building process.
Yeah, our budget estimates incorporate the cost of survey of design fees, because we're a design builder, design's a part of that. So those soft costs are included within. Really, the only soft costs that wouldn't be included would be your cost of financing, or cost of legal fees, yeah. But the remainder of it would be incorporated in what we typically provide.
And it's got project management is included in this, architectural engineering fees, bond, safety.
There's some contingency dollars built in there, general conditions, so again, it's the legal fees and, the cost of issuance. So I would say those typically, are in that, near that 20% range.
I'm just gonna make a comment. I've talked to several people on the board and people not on the board. We're all in here, we know, for 4 years. My goal of being on the school board was to come in and try to make positive change. I don't know if I'll run for reelection. It's not about that. This is who is on the board right now. And so one of the things that we were really interested in is making sure that we had feedback from the community. And that's where we've come up with these ideas. I think it would be a travesty to not do what we know we can do right now. And what we know we have available to us is bond money. We don't know what the referendum would look like. It may not, nothing may pass ever again. I don't know. We don't know that. What we do know is that we're going to have $24 million to spend in the best way possible. And we need to make some kind of positive change to affect the most kids, the most staff, the most helpful thing to our community in general, something else we can be proud of, something the kids and the staff can be proud of. And I think looking at the options that we've come down to, we know we're all worried about security. All of us are worried about security. That's a must. And then I think if you talk to anyone in the school system, even Cody at the last meeting, I'm not in the elementary school, but that's where the greatest need is right now, because it's crazy. If you walk in here, how many kids they're doing such a great job. But I think it is our job as elected officials to make sure that we're pushing something forward that's for the greater good. And so I guess that's just my opinion, is that I think if we can affect positive change right now or in the next 2 years, we may not be on the board in 2 years from now. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the next board's going to decide. I can't change that, but I can change something right now. And so that's where my mind is with this. I want to be a good steward of tax dollars. That's what this is. I love that we can make this change or something like this without having to raise taxes. We're all mindful of that, and those people, those households, in my line of work, we work on a budget. We figure out how to make things work on a budget. Your house probably, hopefully, works the same way. We're doing no different, just on a much, much larger scale. So I'm excited to be a part of this. I think this is something that we can do right now, that this group and this community right now has a chance to do something really positive. So that's my
Just one more question. As we look at this building and its footprint, and my dad was on the school board when they built this building. There's a problem on this property with salt mines that are uncharted. Have we done anything to look and see what added cost there might be if we, like the southwest corner of this building did when they built it, right through the top of the shaft of a slope mine, coal mine, it's not charted, just because there's a bunch of them out here.
Not yet.
No, that hasn't been done. That would be something that would have to be done before we started moving forward. But you bring up something that's been on the mind of several of the board members that have given me feedback, and we've talked about it with performance services before we would bring forth any referendum that would talk about building on the new property. We feel like a site evaluation needs to be done. There's a lot of stories about what goes on out there. And if anything was done previously, we've not been able to find it as far as any tests done to see if there were issues out there or whatever. So, yes, you're right. Now that hasn't been done here at this property. But it would be part of moving forward, and it could definitely have an impact. That was one of the comments that I made a while back as we were being compared to what could have been done back in 2019. It's not only just the cost of things have gone up, but there was no guarantee that everything that was planned in 2019 could have been done for the budget that was there, just like there wouldn't be with what we're doing here. You just have to try and do the best you can. And you know, we dealt with that on a lot smaller scale with Hatchet Hollow and the contingencies that come about when the field won't pack and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's got to be some of that built into the budgets for sure. Well, at this point, if nobody else has anything that we want to discuss publicly, I think maybe we can wrap this up and you know, we're all available if you want to talk privately or you take some time to digest this and want to talk about it more. No decisions are being made tonight or tomorrow night or anything like that. We're trying to make progress forward. We appreciate everyone taking the time to be out here tonight and give us your feedback and be a part of this process that we started back in January as a community, I feel. With that, we will hand out the different options here so that y'all have a copy of that to look over. Thank you.